Sparty Rock is in the house tonight. Watch this video and your grade will be fine. I'm about to expand your mind. It's much more fun when this stuff is online. Today's topic, the battle over the ratification of the Constitution, Federalists and Anti-Federalists. Now, we're still rehashing some of the grounds you stomped in US history, so we'll move through at a fairly quick pace, especially with the Federalists. After all, you'll be so sick of the Federalist Papers by the time I'm through with you that you'll hate these guys anyway, so let's go ahead and meet your new enemies. Anemones. First distinction to make here, when we're talking about the Federalists, in this chapter, we're talking about the three guys who wrote the Federalist Papers. Hamilton, Dracula, James Madison, and John Jay. Although, when it comes to the last one, he only wrote one, so he's kind of less consequential for us. Really, we're talking about Hamilton and Madison up there. We're not talking yet about the Federalist Party, an organization that will come later that wasn't quite actually a political party, but more so an alliance among like-minded national government advocates. No, what we're talking about here is specifically the authors of the Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers, as you should remember, were a series of essays written by these three cats up here using the pen name Publius to convince the representatives of the state of New York to ratify the newly written Constitution. The Constitution had been written and proposed, and now 9 states needed to approve of it in order for it to become the binding, supreme law of the land. Bear in mind once again, the Articles of Confederation said that amending the government must be unanimous. The Constitution, already treating itself as the supreme law of the land, redefines the process for amending the government so that states like Rhode Island and North Carolina don't screw it up for everyone else. Now, here are some of the keys to what the Federalists believe, and probably the first key is that they believe that the people should have representatives who serve as trustees, the trustee model of representation. You send your guy to Congress and he acts as an agent who has your best interest at heart, and you trust that he has your best interest at heart. The idea is that your representative probably knows good public policy pretty well and has a few areas of expertise that are related to the specific needs of your district, and therefore he, or in the modern day, she, can make decisions that are in the best interest of the district members, even if they're not always pleasing to their constituents. You hire, effectively speaking, a professional legislature who does the job for you. See, part of what the Federalists feared was tyranny. Not the kind where you're ruled over by a single power-mad king, but tyranny of the majority. The idea that if the legislature is always beholden to public opinion, just like the general public or Katy Perry's love interest, it would run hot and cold. People are fickle, and they are unable to foresee long-term consequences. If you give the people what they want all the time, you're going to have a short-sighted government. Trustees can see the long game and therefore avoid the tyranny of quick decisions being made by the whims of the people. They can plan for the future and decide what's possible. That's what politics is, after all, the art of the possible. So, what these Federalists sought was a strong national government, one where legislators, and a chief executive had the ability to make decisions in the best interest of the public without being immediately accountable to public opinion. It's strange to us to think that strong government was needed to prevent tyranny, but it requires that leap of understanding to tyranny of the majority being every bit as damaging as the tyranny of the tyrant in order to understand the Federalist mindset. Maybe one of the best ways to understand the Federalist ideology comes not from one of the 3 writers up here, but instead from John Rutledge. If the gentleman would show the power that could do no harm, he would at once discover it to be a power that could do no good. If the government doesn't have power, the government can't be a positive force in the lives of citizens. That's where that trust factor comes in a Federalist school of thought. Batting for the other team, we have a whole score of Anti-Federalists. The Anti-Federalists were less organized and less of a monolithic thing because, well, they're Anti-Federalists. They rejected national authority, so they were different in every region. But what is central to the Anti-Federalist movement is the following things. First, they're concerned that professional legislators in a government wouldn't be able to understand the true needs of their district. If you need to be in Philadelphia or Boston or New York or Washington to govern, there's no realistic way that you could have an understanding of what's going on in North Carolina and what North Carolina's needs are during this time period. With the fear being that Congress would not be representatives, but rather its own aristocratic ruling class. Now, that's a bit of a big jump that I'm making there, that it turns into oligarchy all of a sudden, but if you isolate a whole bunch of like-minded wealthy elites, you get a group that's pretty out of touch with reality. In the modern day, we call them NBA owners. What the Anti-Federalist feared was that this new government would undo the revolution and bring back a distant, ruling, taxing power, just as they had had under the British colonial rule. And that's more of the traditional tyranny that they are fearing, the tyranny of the minority or the tyranny of the one. They feared the tyranny of Mr. Madison or an Emperor King Washington. They feared that the newly created Congress with the power to tax would use that power to effectively pillage the country to feed a demanding, large national government that they didn't necessarily want in the first place. And they didn't want that largely because they were mostly happy with state governance and felt that states could and should maintain most federal government functions because, by gosh, they know their people better. Two of our most prolific Anti-Federalists are Patrick Henry, my boy from Ashland, VA here, just a stone's throw away from Randolph-Macon College, the perfect home for all students and learners, brochures available, and George Clinton, seen at top there. As an idea of what the argumentation we're dealing with looked like, let's take a peek at one of Clinton's centennial papers. The Brutus Papers, notoriously written by Robert Yates, and the Cato Papers by George Clinton are two of the most prominent Anti-Federalist writings. Let's take a look at a paper, Sentinel number 1, from the Cato Papers of George Clinton. The Constitution of Pennsylvania is yet in existence, so you have the right to freedom of speech and of publishing your sentiments. How long those rights will pertain to you, you and yourselves are called upon to say, whether your houses shall continue to be your castles, whether your papers, your persons, and your property are to be held sacred and free from general warrants, you are now to determine. Whether the trial by jury is to continue as your birthright, the freedom of Pennsylvania, nay, of all America, are now called upon to declare. What we see here is that there is a fear that this strong national government proposed by the Federalists will start to take some of the rights that people have come to hold dear from their states. This excerpt from Sentinel number 1 here is particularly important to us because we see what the major contribution of the Anti-Federalists is. It's their reservations that give us the protections against these things. It's the opposition of the Anti-Federalists that make it so that the Bill of Rights is ultimately added to the Constitution in order to be ratified. In fact, that's why our state of North Carolina dragged its feet and once rejected the Constitution, was because of the demand to see a Bill of Rights added to protect against these very things. Although it wasn't just the protection of rights, it was also a outright refutation of national government that defined the Anti-Federalist movement, if we take a look at the words of Patrick Henry. The question turns, sir, on that poor little thing, the expression, we the people, instead of the states of America. I need not take much pains to show that the principles of this system are extremely pernicious, impolitic, and dangerous. The ideas from Patrick Henry, words of Patrick Henry for the people of Patrick Henry, telling us that excluding states from government and taking a focus on the majority and taking a focus on the individual over the state entity, which had up to that point been the guarantor of most freedoms, would be dangerous. That's our quick tour day ratification. We know which side wins in the end, but we'll explore both of their arguments in depth as you create and discuss your attack ads coming up in class. That's it for me. Until next time, be good to yourselves and each other.